Hello, hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We got a little bit of a later start last time and ate into our presentation. So I'm going to try to get through our announcements soon so that we can hand it over to Robin. Hello, welcome to our April design feed for 2025. My name is Cameron Boland, your AIA president. I wanted to first off thank Prince Technologies for sponsoring this design feed today. So everybody give them a round of applause. Thank you all very much. We can't do these without our sponsors. There'll be a chance for Allison to come up and speak later in the announcements, but also they have a coffee table set up in the back, so be sure to visit them and get to know each other. Okay, so today's Earth Day, if anyone did not know. So not just today, but every day, it's more important than ever to consider the agency our work as curators of the built environment has in our changing climate and Earth. The built environment accounts for 40% of greenhouse emissions annually, and we have the immense opportunity in our every choice to make a difference as designers. AIA makes it easy to learn and equip ourselves to make these choices in our work and be a part of like-minded communities actively seeking a sustainable advancement in architecture. The AIA Committee on the Environment, AIA 2030, AIA's Framework for Design Excellence, AIA's Material Pledge. All of these are available for free and easily accessible online. And all we have to do is choose to be a part of this change and do something with it. So on this 55th Earth Day anniversary, I challenge each of us in the room to do our part as architects and designers in contributing to a sustained and thriving Earth for the future. So now on to our upcoming events, which is one today, actually. Our K-12 in conjunction with Keep Knoxville Beautiful we're doing our Schoolscapes project today at Lonsdale Elementary, where we're doing a lot of planting and just landscape implementation for that school. So if you're interested in that, there's information at the bottom, but you can also contact Michael Travis with BMA. This should be pretty exciting. Hopefully the weather holds, or maybe we can get everything planted and get a good rain on it right whenever we get it in the ground. Also coming up on Wednesday at 4:30 in partnership with IIDA, Zach Rose, mechanical engineer. I don't know if Zach's here today. He's going to be giving a presentation on bridging design and systems with interior environments. So the QR code there if you're interested in attending. Our Tri-Cities Tech Session up in Northeast Tennessee on May 13th. There will be a presentation with Todd Wood of DT Wood Engineering on riparian buffers and impacts on properties, which is pretty interesting on our river systems and creek systems and impact on site design. So that should be a pretty interesting discussion. And if you'd like to attend in person, of course you can be there, but the QR code can lead you to the Zoom link as well. Also in Tri-Cities on May 17th, there's been a lot of planning going into this. Post Helene effects, Helene hurricane. We've been working to put together a regional resilience roundtable. This is actually the second annual. There's going to be ETSU's geoscience department, as well as the state climate office is going to have representation there to speak everything about preparedness, recovery, and resilience in light of Helene and planning for the future. So if you're interested in being a part of that, again, May 17th, all day, it's free, lunch is provided. Just scan the QR code or look on our website for more information. Our next meeting will not be a design feed. It's going to be our second annual Mayor's Lunch, which will be here, of course. We're excited to host that every year. So be on the lookout for that. And then, of course, at the end of the month, we're about to get to that season again. Volleyball League is coming up, and signups are at the QR code below, as well as Thunder Bowl. Looking forward to July. That'll be coming up as well. So still looking for some sponsors and all of these events. So if anybody's interested or knows somebody, please reach out to us. And also from some save the dates, we are going to host our second annual Housing East Tennessee competition this year. This year is going to be focused on single stair housing. Knoxville recently, in 2024, codified and legalized single-stair housing in our city. So we're primed for an opportunity to study the opportunities with that housing typology in our city and around our region. There's going to be a kickoff event for this, well, for free beer, free pizza, Sanders Pace Architecture on May 16th, 5:30 to 6. So there'll be more information on that coming up soon, and then all of the other dates and information along with that. Also, a save the date for farther out in September. We've been working with multiple different partners, as you can see on the bottom, with TVA, the City of Knoxville, KUB, Sierra Pacific, and the East Tennessee Historical Society to put together a insight carbon analysis for Revit. I know that's getting a bit technical, but a lot of us in here use Revit for drafting software, but Revit has built in the program both an operational and embodied energy modeling software. So we're bringing in Dan Stein from Lake Flato out of Texas to teach a half-day workshop on the program to equip us all with the knowledge and agency enabled to actually use those programs. Once again, it is completely free for AIA members. It'll be at the Historical Society on Gay Street, and lunch will be provided. So there's, as long as you can get the time off from work, there's really no excuse not to go. So please be on the lookout for that. Upcoming meetings. Got a lot of meetings, of course. Our Committee on the Environment is coming up with on this Thursday with our very own Dustin Durham is going to be presenting on their nonprofit with Yes Knoxville, which is going to be aligning with design for equitable communities, and it's going to be speaking towards zoning and the relationship of sustainability in the large and urban development. So that should be pretty exciting. It's going to be at Smee Busby Architects. Not a lot of parking at Smee Busby, so we're all encouraging us to carpool and use public transit to get there. The Regional Resilience Subcommittee that happens every 2 weeks is also coming up on Fridays, and you can get a hold of Jay McCusker or Polly Horn in Tri-Cities to be a part of that. Our EDI committee has started meeting as of last month, so there'll be another meeting on May 5th, and you can reach out to Jeffrey Cavalier for information on that. Our K-12 committee meeting is on May 7th. Reach out to Michael Travis for information on that meeting. And then our EPYA committee you'd speak to Aaron Jarnigan to talk about the May 13th meeting. And we have a happy hour coming up at the Architectural Collaborative, or sponsored by the Architectural Collaborative on May 29th. Okay, our 2025 partners, I'll go through all of these, which we're very excited to continue to be building our partnerships. Our 2025 allied members, our 2025 partners, bronze partners, silver partners, gold partners, and platinum partners. We're very thankful for our sponsorships. If everybody could give a round of applause for that. Okay, and as I mentioned before, we wouldn't be here today without the sponsorship of Design Feed with Prince Technologies. So I'd like to give Ms. Oakes a chance to come up to the stage and say a few words.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. I love networking, hanging out with architects because you guys are both creative and logical. I actually have a degree in painting and drawing, and so I only have the creative part. So I am the Director of Business Development and Sales for Prince Technologies. We are a low voltage company. So we do audio, video, network cabling, and we actually just started doing security stuff. So we do access control and camera systems. So we really do rely on our relationships and partnerships with architects because you guys are there from the design at the very beginning, working with the customer. And the customer often forgets about network cabling and audio, video, and access control and all those things until way late in the project. So we definitely encourage, if you guys have a project that you're working on that has that scope, that the customer has not already found a vendor or partner, to send us an email and do an introduction for us. We really, really appreciate that. If I haven't met you before, I'd love to meet you today, or just shoot me an email and I'd love to take you to lunch or coffee. And again, we just appreciate our relationship with AIA. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Allison. Okay, I'm going to actually bring to the stage a friend of Robin Ganser, our speaker today, Josh Shelton, to give the introduction.
Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, Prince Technologies, for the support today. Thanks to AIA East Tennessee bringing this all together. Design Feed has been amazing. It's bringing practitioners from all over the country that inspire us, and today is no exception. And so Robin Ganser is here. Robin, thanks for making the trip to Knoxville. Robin received his BA in architecture and business from the University of Minnesota. And although his website at Coen Partners suggests that his career began with neighborhood planning and interactive design charrettes, he did tell me once that he switched to landscape architecture after being assigned to a seamlessly endless task of designing urinal stalls for a large project in Texas. And I don't usually like the field of architecture to lose talent to another discipline, but in this case, I can promise you that we gained an ally. Robin is now with Coen Partners. He's a partner there. Coen Partners is a landscape architecture and urban design practice based in Minneapolis that somehow is simultaneously boutique and global. The firm has grown from 10 to nearly 80 team members in the 13 years since Robin joined. And it's hard to imagine maintaining a boutique approach while catalyzing this sort of growth and reach over such a short period of time. What makes this possible is Robin's unique ability to quickly see any project through a multitude of lenses. I've had the opportunity to work with him on some really thorny urban design projects across the country and even across the world. And he effortlessly imagines a project's complexity through not just his own discipline, but from the perspective of the economics consultant, the disparate client group, through the work of technicians and craftsmen, through the branding consultant, through the eyes of project stakeholders, and often through the skepticism of critics. Robin's brand of urban design and project leadership does not stem from guarding the position of his own discipline and cultural context, but rather a position of seeking potential and value through the mess of the work that we all do together across disciplines, across politics, and across cultures. The world needs more designers like Robin. So it's a pleasure to welcome Robin Ganser to our AIA East Tennessee Design Feed lecture series, and let's offer a warm welcome. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you. Does that work? Is that all right? Yeah, good. Okay. Thank you for having me. This is great. And a great turnout. And from the announcements in this, you guys have a lot of free food at events around town, which is great. So as Josh said, I'm a partner with Coen Partners. We are a landscape architecture, urban design, and planning practice. Started in Minneapolis about 35 years ago by Shane Coen. I joined 13 years ago, and we've always worked around the country. And in the last 10 years, we've really started working around the world. And so I'll go into a little bit of what that journey's looked like. But to start with, our vision statement is that we inspire transformative design that regenerates the earth. And this is very much an aspirational vision for us. It's something that we refine on an annual basis. And I wanted to hit on this right up front because we made a tweak this year that I thought was really interesting, was switch that transformative and inspire. We've always been very focused on designing, delivering, building spaces. And as we've taken more of a leadership position on projects, like the ones that I'll go into, it's been as much about inspiring clients, our collaborators, our team members, as it is about actually getting the work done. And I think that's been a big shift for us that I hope you'll be able to see. We have a pretty diverse team at this point. I'll go into a little bit about our office and our practice because there's some unique aspects of that have helped us deliver some of this work. We're about 75, 80 people. We have 15 nationalities represented right now, 11 native languages. We've got people who sit in 12 different time zones, 15 states, and 7 countries. And I'll share a little bit about what that looks like. We've got architects, we've got engineers, we've got planners, artists, all kind of coming together around the practice of landscape architecture. And one of our core tenets that has always stayed with us is that we put our feet on the ground. And this is both a metaphor and quite literal. We spend a lot of time at our project sites. We dig into the culture, we understand the people, and it's been fundamental to our success and to creating things that are very contextual and do not feel like they've kind of landed there from somewhere else. We have a collection of core design principles that we've always followed, and we interpret these in different ways, but fundamentally, as landscape architects, I think one of the things that sets us apart is that we never mimic nature. We are very intentional about designs that acknowledge nature, that support nature, that interpret it and adapt it, but always kind of using structured human-made lines to acknowledge that what we've done, our interventions, are in fact human-made, and that we make that distinction. As I said, we're a global practice. The blue dots are projects around the world. We've got about $4 billion worth of built work that has been delivered thus far in 35 years. And you start to see these dots around Asia and so on, but a lot of our work in the last 10 years is focused on the Middle East. And I'll go into kind of the situations that arose that allowed us to do that. We have 2 office hubs. So when we went into the pandemic, obviously everybody went remote, and we had people moving away from Minneapolis out to LA, out into the middle of nowhere, and it all worked really well. And we actually delivered construction documents on the biggest project we've ever done at the end of 2020 in the depths of the pandemic. And so as we came out of that, we knew that we had to grow significantly. We doubled in a year, and our goal was to get 30 people added to the Minneapolis office. And of the 30 people we hired, we got 1 to move to Minneapolis. And so we kind of made the decision, we can either hire the best people or the best people we can get locally. And those are not the same group of people. So we've really leaned into it. We've used all different types of technology. We're 100% cloud-based. People operate from all over. We've got a woman who worked wildly productively from a boat somewhere in Italy for a year. And we do have 2 offices. We've started calling them hubs. It's really where our team comes together. In Minneapolis and in Riyadh, we have team events, we have workshops. We bring all of our partners and directors together several times a year. And we connect around our projects. And many of our team members I've only seen on project sites in person. We recently, as we started to get beyond the scale where everybody could kind of connect with each other, right around kind of 60 people, we decided to divide the office up into 3 studios to really start to hone in on exactly how we were working, build consistent skills with the team, and talk about our work in different ways. So the first studio is urban infrastructure. And this is what I'll dig into more, one of the core projects that I've had a chance to work on. The second is cultural and ecological tourism. This is essentially a planning practice. We're doing a lot of large-scale planning work, This image here is a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the middle of a national park that we're planning in Northwest Saudi Arabia. And then the third is site, campus, and hospitality, which is kind of more your traditional landscape architecture, urban plazas, resorts. We do a couple single-family homes every year that we select very carefully. And we're working on some campus projects. And our focus is connecting people to the earth and to each other. A lot of our work is very social. Even when we're looking at single-family homes or hospitality, it's all about how you bring people together around beautifully designed outdoor spaces. You can imagine a slide here that says the Sports Boulevard, which is what I'm going to talk about. So go back in time a little bit. So this is a project that I had the experience of working with Josh on for many years. In 2018, we were approached to dig into what has become one of the largest parks in the world. So I'm going to run through kind of the sequence of events that brought us there and some of the ways that we started breaking down the scale of this project and what it looks like today. So I vividly remember January 2018, we got an RFP from a kind of a acquaintance of an acquaintance based in Riyadh. And it was titled Design of a Cycling Path Across Riyadh. And all of us kind of pondered why we would travel all the way across the world to design a bike path. And I read through the RFP, and I remember vividly sharing it with Josh and getting on the phone with him. And I think Josh's phrase was, Robin, I think this is a Trojan horse. I don't think this is a bike path. And so for many years, that was kind of our mantra. It's much more than a bike path. And essentially, this was a vision to build a mobility network across the entire city of Riyadh. City we'd only been to a few times many years before, which is where I'll back up to. So in 2014, shortly after I joined the practice, we were connected through a mutual acquaintance with a government agency in Riyadh. The king of Saudi was King Abdullah at the time. He was building all kinds of big, crazy things without a whole lot of plan involved. And one of them was the CAF, King Abdullah Financial District. Picture all of Lower Manhattan being built all at the same time with no economic model to support it. And so this government agency called us and they said, we want you to look at designing the 4 square kilometers around it and figure out how to get housing in there, how to make the neighborhood walkable. By the way, we have no transit in Riyadh. It's a city of, at the time, it was a city of 8 million people with no transit, no parks, and no sidewalks, no public life, no public space. So we went there and we dug into it. And this is, literally skyscrapers surrounded by desert and wild grasses. But what we found was quite a bit of chaos and a really, really interesting culture. Really beautiful people, extremely welcoming, extremely ambitious and interested in how do we elevate our city? How do we retain people here and maintain our culture? They always say, we don't want to be Dubai. We're not trying to be Singapore. We're trying to be Riyadh, but make it better. And how do we do that? How can you help us do that? So we did a comprehensive master plan for 60,000 new homes surrounding this district, parks, open space, connectivity, internal mobility networks, and they loved it. And we put a lot of energy into carrying this forward. And one of the key ideas was the area on the very top, the northern edge. So this was a road called South Ben Mikrin Road, and it was huge high voltage cabling. It's a utility corridor. So tons of utilities underground, huge high voltage cables overhead. And we said, you know, what if you took that segment, that's about 2 kilometers, and you buried those lines, and this is public land, so then you make this parks, and you front new development on that park to take advantage of the value that you've added. And they loved that idea. And we produced all the fancy renderings and all of that. And the whole project was approved. And then King Abdullah passed away, and everything went silent, the whole kingdom, for years. And that brought us back to 2018, where we get this RFP. And what we learned is that they took this idea of the 2 kilometers and they said, you know, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. And so we're going to do all 35 kilometers of that corridor. We're going to bury all of it and turn the whole thing into a park. So this little idea with one government agency expanded into the Sports Boulevard as we learned about it. This is what it looked like. And you'll see what it looks like today. So digging into this project and trying to understand what it looked like. For most of 2018, I shot back and forth between Minneapolis and Riyadh, trying to understand this place, trying to understand where they were going, what they were doing, how they were trying to evolve their culture under their new leadership. Many of those trips were with Josh and El Dorado. We worked with HR&A advisors out in New York on the economics. We worked with a Spanish engineering firm that we had connected with, and several other players along the way. And trying to wrap our heads around the scale of this project. So 35 kilometers through the middle of the city, and then which is about 20 miles, and then 50 kilometers north-south along a sunken drainage way, and then 60 kilometers north-south on the opposite side of the city, out through the desert, wrapping around the airport. So we partnered with a local Saudi office, and spent a lot of time in their office, and rolled out these huge plans. We had one plan that was about as long as this room, just to get everything kind of visual across that 30 kilometers, mapping out how do you break this down? How do you start to think about what could actually work here? And a big part of how we started talking about this with the client was around these kind of benchmark projects, right? So this was a really important one. This is Madrid, Rio. Many years ago, Madrid took a series of highways lining the river. They tunneled all of those, some of them under the river, and converted the entire space to park. Beautiful project. Westate was the landscape architect, and TIPSA, the Spanish engineering firm, did all the engineering, led the whole project. That's how we found them, was from this project. Another really important benchmark that we studied a lot is Cheonggyecheon in South Korea. This was, again, an elevated highway that they didn't tunnel this one. They just tore it out. They just got rid of it. And all the traffic in the city was fine. So we've used this as a benchmark in many ways that I'll talk about. They daylit the river. They brought it back to life. They restored it ecologically. And it's been a wildly successful public space. And then things like Brooklyn Bridge Park, these long-term projects that have really transformed urban environments and add real estate value at the same time. But we kept comparing these in scale to the Sports Boulevard, and the client kept saying, yeah, we get it, but that's like this piece, and that's this piece, and that's this piece. We need a project that actually hits on the scale that we're talking about. So we did actually at one point do a scale comparison on the Great Wall of China, which started to actually resonate with them, what they were actually dealing with. So you string all these projects out here, and it's not even close to the scale of what we were dealing with. So as Josh was talking about kind of layered complexities in projects, this was one that had every possible layer of both how to sell it to the client and to senior leadership within the country to secure funding, but also to make sure that we didn't screw anything up. There were so many different aspects of how we sorted this. So starting with actually selling the idea of cycling and mobility. Again, this is a city that really had no concept of micromobility. It's the most auto-oriented city in the world that I've ever visited. It's, again, picture a city the size of Houston, mostly designed by Houston traffic engineers in the 60s and 70s. And the biggest asset that they have, though, is that all the roads are really wide. And so we started doing these studies of how do you narrow the road and add green space, narrow the road and add bikeways. And it works pretty well across the city. So we started talking about, what are the benefits of cycling? How do we start to quantify these? How have other people quantified these? Copenhagen is a really interesting example that was very auto-oriented for many years and very intentionally transitioned to a bike-oriented city. Increases in happiness. The cycling infrastructure is very inexpensive compared to auto infrastructure. So there's a major return on investment. We looked at health benefits as they're tracked across the world and started to kind of build this clear case for why the country should be investing in this cycling infrastructure. Then we started digging through a series of other layers. First, parks, right? They wanted this cycling infrastructure. We understood that. How do we sell that you should actually be building green space? And you should really invest in green space. And so with HR&A advisors on the economic side, we went through a whole series of studies of open spaces that added significant value to the real estate around it. It's well documented at this point and not hard to find. And so we laid these out. And one of the key components of those open spaces is that they're active. They're actively programmed. They're well maintained. Passive open space does one thing. Active open space does a very different thing for a city. So breaking this down, the action here was create a bold linear park that is activated and designed for that level of activation. Of course, we're in the middle of the desert, so water's critical. One of the craziest things that we learned, so Riyadh sits actually on top of a very deep aquifer that is draining. They get some portion of their water from the aquifer. They get about 70% of their water from desalination 800 miles away. So you're desalinating water, using a ton of energy to do it. It's very expensive. They pipe it 800 miles. And within the city's distribution system, they lose 60% of that water just because the pipes leak. And it just drifts out into the sand. And it creates this weird toxic sludge that sits just below the surface. And so when you dig a basement in Riyadh, you have to dewater it permanently because there's water everywhere that you can't use. It's crazy. They're fixing it. They're working very hard to fix it now. But we mapped out a 3-layer system for how you pump up that shallow groundwater, treat it, use it for irrigation, use domestic water, set up gray water systems, treat that, use it for water features. So we had a series of systems where the water for the open space, for irrigation, for water features, et cetera, none of it was being used for the first time. It was all recycled. And then mobility. This was fundamental to the project. So this utility corridor that snakes across the entire city was a major barrier. In 35 kilometers, there were only 5 points that you could actually cross it. And so the highways would bring you up to it and you do this massive U-turn thing and created way more complexity than it needed to. So what we figured out is if we started adding these north-south connections between neighborhoods, we could actually reduce the number of lanes running east-west along this corridor by half, and it would improve the network functionality across the entire city. And we modeled this. TIPSA did a fantastic job. They modeled the entire city, showed all these connections, and demonstrated to the client that, look, we can make this better for people and actually better for cars at the same time. And you're slowing traffic. You're moving from place to place more directly. You're not doing these big U-turns. It's also good for retail, for foot traffic. Win-win. So this was another aspect of how we kind of pitched this and sold it. And we wrapped this up, and this diagram presented many, many times over the years, and it was so fundamental. It's like you can just add bikes, you can add cycling, great. And it has these certain benefits, health, joy, whatever. But if you take that and you pair it with parks and open space, and you pair it with real estate, and you pair it with green infrastructure and public transport and these iconic destinations, which is a key piece that I'll get into, you get so much more. And they all start to magnify each other into a really active place where everybody wants to be. So across the corridor, we started to map out all the different types of cycling experiences. You've got off-road cycling out in the desert. You've got kind of casual riding through parks. We created one zone, or envisioned one zone, where we sunk the open space down. We made this huge cut through the city so that you can ride below the rest of the city, continuous. All the cars kind of cross over the top of you, created its own little microclimate. We positioned some of the cycling adjacent to a metro that was under construction. And then the Wadi, which is essentially a dry riverbed, was another one of the really interesting and exciting cycling experiences. But then within that, right, so you've got all these different experiences, but this is, again, 135 kilometers. How do you draw people from place to place along it? How do you get people excited about going there and riding these spaces? Which is where one of our other really amazing partners came in, Hesse McGraw, who's with Eldorado at the time. And Hesse brought this kind of art curation lens to public space activation. And what was interesting is Saudi had, at the time, a very active, but kind of under the radar art scene. A lot of it was in Jeddah, not much of it was in Riyadh yet. Some very talented artists who really weren't doing much work in the kingdom. They hadn't received the sponsorship, they hadn't received the opportunity. And so we started connecting with them and kind of building out this arts ecosystem of ways of creating specific experiences, ways of tapping into specific audiences and individuals, and then ways of creating places, all with local Saudi artists. And that art scene has really changed dramatically in the 5-6 years that we've been working on this, to the point where Riyadh is now a major art hub for the kingdom and for the Middle East. And so we started to identify these different types of activations: iconic works, spectacles, hubs, field works, and then artist-led transformations. And we started weaving these into every aspect of design. So brought artists in to collaborate on building facades, brought artists in to collaborate on paving patterns and water features. And it added a layer that the Saudis that we were presented to had never seen before, had never thought about. And it was very successful in building excitement in a way that design by itself just can't do. And then with those, we started to create a series of these iconic destinations. And the destinations were these kind of core moments that either are a starting point or an ending point or a point along a journey across this corridor. Many of these have carried forward and have started to come to fruition. Many of them, the ideas got kind of pulled and moved on to another project somewhere else in the kingdom, somewhere else in the city. And some of them have kind of evolved into different things, but the idea remained intact. And one of them in particular that I love, I remember sitting with Josh in the Royal Palace one night, probably at about 4 a.m. And Josh kind of slides a paper across the table. He's like, dude, I got a crazy idea of stacking these all different sporting venues into a giant tower, which again, just kind of captured everybody's imagination in a really interesting way. Again, we focused in very heavily on how do you pitch this? How do you make sure that at some point along the way, somebody doesn't raise a flag and say, wait a second, how many billions of dollars are we spending on open space? Why are we doing that? And so we always kind of grounded it back in economics. You're doing this because it creates value in these other places. This is how you're going to capture that value. This is how it's going to drive your economy in a different direction. And this was a very important piece of how we continually told that story. So coming out of the master plan phase, we started to have this vision for open space stretched across the corridor, transit-oriented developments. We worked through specific blocking and stacking and calculating exactly how much real estate you could hold within this corridor, how it would help to pay for the open space over time. And then we broke the whole thing down into these character zones. And we like to joke, you got to be very careful about ideas that you throw out when you're working over there, because sometimes they stick and then you can't unwind them. And 6 years later, most of these are still referenced exactly this way. Arts District, the Urban Wadi is a phenomenal, interesting open space, entertainment and athletics district. And then the Eco District is kind of the future phase. And we got to the place of describing this whole project around this kind of singular diagram. We always try to simplify these things down. And it was to take a highway corridor and an infrastructure corridor and adapt it to a corridor for cycling and sports and enabling vibrant communities. And as the project has evolved and grown and legs have kind of sprouted off of it, it's actually stretched to about 200 kilometers at this point that has been planned. And in those 6 years, all these other projects have started to emerge, and they all kind of connect in one way or another to this project. This connects to the new airport. It connects to a major hospitality development called Durea. It connects to the redevelopment of an old army base that is now King Salman Park, one of the biggest urban parks in the world. Connects to the largest female university in the world, and metro and bus connections citywide. So digging into it a little, like, this is what it looked like. It was grim. It was a weird place to be. Brownfield desert in the middle of the city. And this aspiration is actually the way that it's starting to evolve. So digging into the specifics of the design, of course, zooming in on every intersection, we started to break down what are the challenges here? How do we actually connect this into the existing fabric once we have a design here? We did an interesting study where we would map specific land uses and create these heat maps, and the resulting voids did a lot of the driving of the land uses within the corridor, right? So within this corridor, there's park space and there's development, and a lot of the data analysis drove how we programmed that development space. And at one point, we developed this diagram also where across the top, you've got the entire 35-kilometer corridor. And then pulled down, you've got all these different asset types, from the iconic destinations to open space to development density, et cetera. And this matrix became a way that we could all kind of quickly understand the programming and how it stacked up and how it aligned and the adjacencies between them. And then started zooming in on what is this actually going to look like and feel like. This was an early rendering of the Arts District and a beautiful mosque in the foreground that we worked with a local architecture firm, 2 women who do really beautiful work. This is a rammed earth project that is now under construction. And the Urban Wadi, again, this kind of sunken open space that will actually be the longest constructed water feature in the world. It flows 2 kilometers from either direction down to a low point. And then the entire sunken area will catch and retain stormwater in major flood events. And early ideas on the sports tower tied in with the metro. So at the conclusion of the master plan, we presented this entire thing with models and videos and all of this to the Crown Prince and to the King. And the entire project was pushed to move forward. And in true Saudi fashion, they were like, okay, master plan's approved. Now just go design the whole thing. Which is when everything kind of started to get actually crazy. So this is the Urban Wadi. This is a specific high point between the Arts District and the Urban Wadi, stretching out into the distance, all the transmission lines in place. And so the first step, we thought, look, okay, let's start with the easiest piece. The promenade is about 2 kilometers. It's just that little circled nub down on the end, bridge, and a section of public open space, kind of a narrow corridor. 1,500 kilometers of corridor, roadways reconfigured, and then the cycling bridge. And this cycling bridge, again, collaboration with Eldorado, with Josh, and it has really evolved into a very iconic piece for the city. There's a pedestrian way and a cycling way that kind of merge and separate and weave you across King Khalid Highway, connecting the Sports Boulevard, the major open space, to Wadi Hanifa. And shade becomes a very critical part of open space. And what was really successful about this is that it creates moments of shade and then moments of open to the sky. And there's this interesting dynamic with shade there where you want shade during the day, but the problem then is that everybody uses open space at night. It's a very nighttime oriented culture. So if you shade everything, then nobody wants to be out there when they're actually using it, because then you're kind of inside. So it's this balance of shade and access to the sky that you're constantly navigating. And this bridge does a really good job of it. Creates the perforation so you can kind of see and feel your surroundings. Then there's moments where you're completely outside, moments that kind of peel off to the edge so you can stand and kind of observe your surroundings. It's super interesting to stand over the highway, kind of watch the cars flow underneath. Envision this kind of large amphitheater stair and the kind of ADA accessible ramp that peels you off to the side. And as this thing started to take shape, everybody got so excited. And it has become one of the really iconic moments for the Sports Boulevard. It's the first thing that opened. It opened to the public a couple months ago. And it is packed all the time. At night, never during the day. People just don't use open space during the day. But the quality of light, the quality of views, and the kind of the feel of the space, the slope, it's been very successful, and it kind of glows as this like giant python that kind of snakes across the city. It's about 1 kilometer long. So then when you land at the end of that, you come into the promenade, and this was a zone about 25 meters wide of open space that we started to divide up again into zones. So you've got different experiences that flow from kind of casual hangout, these big broad steps, to moments of gathering. This is the cycling pavilion. Really great prototype. Again, a close collaboration with Eldorado. Balancing, once again, the kind of shade versus environmental comfort, gathering, and the functionality of restrooms and cafes and things. And these, as design and construction has evolved, the client is taking these and using them in different interesting ways as kind of a kit of parts. This one is just a wide open pavilion. You can kind of see how people are using this space. And then there are others that have actually been enclosed, and they've got little coffee shops dropped in amongst the rest of the open space. In the next zone, we started to play with elevation changes with this, what we call the thread. It's this winding elevated walkway, originally envisioned to be kind of a treetop walk. And it brings you up to this higher level. So as the trees mature, as all of the planting matures, you'll kind of hide in this structure. And you get kids running up there. People will take their bikes up on top of it, cruise through it. And this is one of the artist collaborations that has been really interesting. So in the center of the promenade, we created this zone, these 2 triangular water features that flow down into a sunken space and bring you into the center of this kind of shade canopy, right? So we worked with Fluidity, water feature designer out of LA, on the water feature. And we worked with Dana Awatani, a Saudi artist based in Jeddah, on a pattern for the canopy. And Dana does really amazing work with kind of modern interpretations of traditional Islamic patterning. And so we worked with her to develop a pattern, and then this was all carried out with kind of a design build art fabricator. the original renderings. It's essentially this kind of lampshade that kind of glows at night, come down into that space. You've got the white noise of water on both sides. And this is last month when it opened. Illuminated from inside. They host events down in there. They host small concerts. And the water feature and the noise kind of flowing down that stone is like perfect, really magical. And then moving into the arts district, this is another collaboration. This was the biggest of all of the towers running along the corridor. There were over 150 of these towers, and this was the biggest one. It's a corner tower. And so that's Hesse looking up at this and thinking, we got to figure out a way to keep this. So we worked with a local artist who developed essentially a kaleidoscope structured from that tower so that when the sun sets on the western edge of the corridor, right in line with the corridor, it casts these colors across the public open space, across the plaza. And this is, sadly, I'll say, this was an adaptation. We had originally intended to use the actual tower that was there, structural analysis and this and that, and they decided we can't actually use the tower that's there. So this was right before they took it down, and then they reconstructed it, purpose-built for this. And this was, again, a couple weeks ago. Finished, bridges in place, open space in place, and at dusk, it does exactly what it's supposed to, and that whole plaza is covered with, colored light. It's fantastic. So back to this image. This area is the urban wadi. It's a sunken open space with major new development corridor within it. The open space adds value to the development. These buildings are all being designed following a design code that we worked with Foster and Partners to create. And this area is well under construction. They're excavating a huge area of this, reconfiguring utilities, and then all of this open space is scheduled for within the next few years that this will all get open. So this is a Google Earth image. It's about 4 kilometers of this sunken open space that's underway now. And at the very bottom of this, at the low point, the water from these water features flows there. It pools. It has the ability to drain and be stored before a storm event or during the day, then recycles and flows again at night. Huge canopy space, retail around this kind of creates this sunken community node. And as the construction has started, as the publicity has started to happen around what this space will be, it's already started to attract new development. And so all of the surrounding areas are starting to transform. They're turning over. There's new plans being submitted. So it's already starting to activate this part of the city in the way that was intended. So here you can see stretching across the entire city with the original King Abdullah Financial District that we first studied. And everything along that line will be under construction by this time next year. And then a completely different part of the project, way out in the desert, the last thing I want to show is the Sand Sports Park. This is 20 square kilometers, huge, vast area of desert that was a government holding south of the airport, kind of on the edge of town. And we were tasked with, okay, we want a huge cycling network out here for races, but it's right in the flight path, and so it's got to be visually iconic, but you can't touch very much, right? This kind of light touch restoration, but super memorable. And so we drew from Najdi, which is kind of the area of Saudi where this exists. Najdi patterns use the specific flower. It's the specific 6-sided flower. And so we created this, but that flower is 4 kilometers across. And we turned it into a cycling track. And so this, when you ride all 6 of these pedals and then around the outside loop, it's exactly a 15-kilometer race course. And the corners are pretty sharp, but we banked the turns on them. And so you can ride these at full speed. And so they've already started hosting races out there. The entire track is terrazzo. It's a local marble aggregate and a yellow Portland cement, poured, ground, smooth, and then sandblasted to exactly the right grit and finish. And the ramps are at a slightly higher grit, so you kind of hold your track as you move through it. And then interspersed across this, we did a dune restoration. And we worked with a local guy, came up with this idea. Nobody had ever done it before that we'd seen, and it's working fabulously. We took palm fronds, all dried out, and just stuck them in the ground in a grid pattern. And those palms are about 1 meter long. And when they were installed, there was about 0.5 meter sticking up. And we positioned these, we studied old Google Maps, and we positioned these where the dunes used to be before they were eroded. And so the wind, as the prevailing winds come in, they catch these grids, and they're completely filling up. And so they've restructured in less than a year. They've restructured all of the dune patterns. And a couple of weeks when I was out there, those palm fronds are almost gone. They've fully kind of covered at this point. And then there's a network of mountain biking that we created. We built a mountain because they wanted mountain biking. So constructed this hill, it's 40 meters high, 10 kilometers of mountain biking, and it's all lit. Everybody uses it at night. They hosted a 5K race and a 15K cycling race that started at 2 a.m. During Ramadan a couple weeks ago. Just a completely nighttime culture. And from the sky, this is a shot out the airplane window, basically, as you land. So it's been pretty cool. In general, it's been a really interesting place to work and a fabulous culture to dig into. So thank you.
Oh, Robin, thank you so much for that. I feel like we could probably have taken a day to really go through all that work and really understand every bit of it. It's beautiful. If I can get this out. Okay, we have a few minutes. Does anybody have any questions for Robin or comments, anything like that they'd like to ask him? Yeah.
Can I go back up there? Oh.
Hi, Robin. You mentioned earlier that one of the main charges of the project was preserving Riyadh's cultural identity amongst the backdrop of these other crazy developing cities that are developing at this rapid pace. Can you speak to some of the challenges you had as someone who is an outsider to this culture coming in and being tasked with not only developing a master plan, but also navigating the cultural nuances of that assignment?
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the most interesting statistics about Riyadh is at the time in 2018, 60% of the population was under 30. So it's super young culture. And this is a group of people under 30 who've grown up in a very specific, very private culture. And then you've got a new leader who is their age and is trying to, I don't want to use the word westernized. He's trying to open up the culture, expand it from a creative perspective, expand it from an economic perspective, and retain threads of that original culture. So it's changing rapidly, right? They don't even know what it is. And so in many cases, it's helping them explore, what do you want to be? What parts of your past and history do you want to carry forward? And what parts of your future do you want to help kind of create and define, right? So, for example, how are they going to use open space? How does this culture use public open space? Well, nobody who lives there knows because they haven't had any, right? And so we spent a lot of time there and a lot of very open conversations with our clients' friends. We'd go out to the desert with them. We still do. We now have an office there with Saudis in our office who are have grown up amidst this change and are kind of navigating the changes themselves. I mean, in short, it's a lot of conversations, it's a lot of listening, and it's a lot of asking questions that they haven't been asked before to help them figure out what it is that they're looking for. What do we want? What kind of ways of using open space feels authentic to us, even though we haven't actually done that before? If that makes sense.
Great. Who else has a question? Right behind me.
Yeah, you did a great job talking about how they relate to the sky, and the fact that they're so driven with nighttime connected. And it seems that the whole idea of living in the desert is connected to sand, almost as if sand has a place at the table in your discussions,
Yeah.
like one of the clients. And looking at especially the bike path, I thought, well, don't they have sandstorms? And wouldn't you like cover that bike path? And then you have to come out and are there special machines that blow the sand off the bike path? And how do you maintain that? And even in the town, in Tennessee, we deal with rain. We have detention ponds, which they don't have all over, even the US, and there they deal with living in the sand. And I just wondered, how long did it take you to incorporate that into your thinking in a way that it was, part of the essence of what you're helping them with?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's many layers of that. But there was one specific experience that made us feel like we weren't really digging into the culture and the context enough, and we really doubled down at that point. One of the early design presentations, once we got into detailed design, we're presenting paving and some of the building facade options and planting options and so on. And the critique from leadership was, you're using whites and you're using cool colors, and everything eventually turns to the color of sand. So it doesn't matter. Like, just embrace it. Use warm colors, use sandstone, because black granite is eventually the color of sand. And so we kind of shifted our entire palette, which was difficult for us as a kind of modern landscape architecture practice. We liked our blacks and our grays and so on, but we shifted our whole thinking to, if you can't get it within 200 miles, we're not going to use it. And just that started to adapt all the materials that we were thinking about to what was appropriate. So sand impacts the color of things. It impacts the maintenance. The sweeping sand off the path. We've had so many conversations about it. And another funny story is, very early on, actually, as we were interviewing for the master plan, the client was asking, at that time, the potential client was saying, what experience do you have working in these really, really extreme climates? And I pulled up images of a kite festival that we have every year in Minneapolis on a frozen lake. And that particular day that I took the photo, it was 20 below zero. And the reference I was making is, look, everybody's got their extremes, right? Knoxville has water, Minneapolis has cold and snow, and you just don't use the open space a lot of the year. There are times where, that's not your design day. That's a throwaway day, and you design for the good days. And so the sand and the snow is similar. And we actually did research on the kind of sweeping machines that we have, the clean sidewalks in Minneapolis. And turns out they work really well for sand also. And so the client has several of those kind of giant roller sweepers that they'll just cruise out and, drive all 15 kilometers of that path, every couple of days to keep the sand off. So it's been an interesting piece of the context, and we've tried to navigate that. I guess first it's wrapping your head around the fact that desert and just vast expanses of sand is nature, and that you get out there in the spring and it all comes to life, and you get these flowers that bloom for like a couple days, and everybody goes out and they bring their blankets out and they have tea in the middle of the night out in the desert. First, understanding, yes, that's nature for this culture. And second, how do we bring that into the city in kind of manicured, captured ways, and do it in a way that doesn't feel artificial.
So can people actually climb up into the Kaleidoscope Tower? It'd be awesome to be able to climb up there and look down on the new creations.
It would be awesome. No, it is not. It is not climbable. We are exploring something similar to that on a different project, but that one, no.
We have time for one more question. Does anybody else have any? Yeah, great.
I read recently that to get a walkable or bikeable community, you need to have the infrastructure for it. That more people bike in San Francisco than in Denver, Colorado, even though San Francisco has a bunch of hills. So y'all did that. Y'all are building the biking infrastructure and other things so they don't have to drive. But what other things are being done in the city, either through y'all or through something else, to get this community that was 100% cars to not drive in cars anymore? What other things are going on?
Yeah, it's a really long list. There is more happening in Riyadh to transform that city than any other place in the world, like hands down. So they opened last month, maybe 2 months ago now. They finally opened a citywide metro system. And, you know, most cities would build one line and you open it, you test it, and then you build another line and you open it and test it. They spent, I think it was $40 billion. They opened somewhere around 100 miles of elevated and subterranean metro all at once. Again, no ridership projections, no kind of budget planning, but it is packed all the time. And it's like the coolest place to be. Everybody wants to ride on the metro. People just ride it around like at night. It's like, you know, like the way that they would go cruise a strip, you know, in years past. So they've built this huge metro. They've got multiple bus networks. There is an organization called Green Riyadh that is going neighborhood by neighborhood. So the whole city is structured in these 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer grids, with kind of, you know, arteries around the outside and then these very insular kind of street network on the interior. They're going block by block and adding connectivity the way that we talked about, kind of connecting things through. They're greening the streets, they're adding cycling lanes, and the goal is by 2035 to have done almost the entire city. So they're just working their way through the whole city. There are, you know, when we started, this was one of the biggest projects in the kingdom. It's now just like one of the little ones. There are multiple giant projects happening around the city that, you know, on the positive side, they're all working toward the same vision of creating walkable places and pedestrian friendly places and more diverse economies. On the downside, there, you know, inevitably there gets to be a bit of competition, a bit of siloing. So you might end up with a whole bunch of walkable places that don't quite connect to each other. To start with, it'll continue to evolve. There was another piece of that I was going to say. So I mentioned that we developed a design code for the architecture within the corridor that developers are now using. Another layer of that is that that code expands 2 kilometers north and south of the corridor. So any development that happens because of the attraction to the Sports Boulevard has to follow a specific development pattern and development code. And it's open space, it's sustainability, it's adding micromobility, you know, bike racks out front, kind of all of the things that we would all expect to be part of a good urban code are now being implemented there also, right down to the level of like materiality, window openings, how you treat your rooftop, you know, mechanical, et cetera. And that covers 60 square kilometers of the city. And so that's already having a huge impact.
This is all really exciting. Everybody give Robin one more round of applause. Okay, that is the culmination of today's meeting. While you're leaving, make sure you use the recycling bins for your boxes. Go see Prince Technologies at the back. There's also design feed posters at the back, as well as 2022 and 23 newly licensed certificates that we're still trying to find the owners for. So look and see if your name's on the table and take one with you. Thank you all very much.